Lunar War, 2045 prologue. The discovery, the dust over Shackleton Crater shimmered like powdered diamonds in the sunless dark. At the southern polar crest, a mining crawler, designated Prospector 3, inched forward on its segmented treads, drilling deeper into a vein no one had expected to find. Inside the crawler, lead geologist Dr. Amelia Rourke stared at her sensor display. The numbers were wrong, not just unusual, impossible. "Run it again," she whispered. Her Ukrainian assistant, Danilo Shevchenko, recalibrated the spectrometer. He looked confused, then alarmed. "It's the same," he said. "A pure metallic lattice. Unknown configuration. Zero resistance across the test strip." Dr. Rourke swallowed hard. That would mean unlimited power transfer, Danilo finished, and thrust-to-mass ratios that make fusion rockets look like antiques. In front of them, a faint golden glow pulsed from the borehole, a metal neither Earth nor Moon had ever produced. Beryllium, a game-changer, a world-changer. Dr. Rourke activated the encrypted transmitter. Prospector 3, to command. "We found something. Extraordinary." But no answer came. Instead, her screen flickered, then died. Danilo frowned. Signal interference? No. A new voice came to the crawler's open-band emergency channel, heavily accented. Mandarin. "Prospector 3, the voice said. "You are trespassing on property of the People's Lunar Federation. Power down and exit your vehicle." Dr. Rourke froze. There is no People's Lunar Federation. But Danilo was already staring at the horizon, at the silhouettes rising over the crater rim. Chinese armored walkers, moving fast. The first battle of the Lunar War will be fought not over ideology, but over a metal glowing gold beneath the ancient dust. Chapter 1. The year the sky caught fire. The year was 2045, and the world had transformed into something almost unrecognizable. What had begun as a slow march toward space had become a sprint, driven by economics, necessity, and fear. Cost of orbit had collapsed. Fusion-assisted boosters, electromagnetic rail launchers, and vacuum-guided space elevators had rewritten the rules of access to the stars. Every major power now possessed fleets of orbit-capable craft, and every craft carried weapons. In Washington, D.C., President Barron Trump stared at the intelligence briefing displayed across the Situation Room wall. Chinese armored units on the moon. A communications blackout across Shackleton Crater. And worst of all, energy signatures indicating the presence of gigawatt-class laser arrays. He exhaled sharply. Ch2 finally made his move, he muttered. His Secretary of Defense nodded. "We believe the Chinese intend to seize the entire South Polar region. All signs point to a military annexation." Around the table, military officials from the U.S., Japan, South Korea, Australia, and NATO watched grimly. The world's first resource war beyond Earth had begun. Chapter 2. The gathering storm. The world reacted to the Shackleton Crater incursion with a shockwave of political fury. But fury alone could not stop a war already unfolding in the silence of space. Across the United States, the Department of Defense shifted into a tempo unseen since the earliest years of the global war on terror, yet on a scale that dwarfed anything from the 21st century. Orbital Command, headquartered above Colorado Springs, lit up with activity. Dozens of Spacewatch officers scanned incoming feeds from Earth-facing satellites, cislunar patrols, and deep space telescopes. The enemy was already moving. U.S. was watching the first Chinese lander transport fleet, 3 massive Chinese Ch1-4 heavy landers, each the size of a football stadium, broke lunar orbit, and began their descent toward the South Pole. Their trajectories were unmistakably aggressive. Ch2 wants everything south of 50 degrees latitude, Admiral Helena Ortiz said, her voice low. Behind her, holographic projections displayed the 3 landers descending through thin arcs of orbital dust. Mining grids, water ice caverns, fusion extraction tunnels. They're planning a full annexation. President Barron Trump leaned forward in his chair. "Are you telling me they're planning to take the entire pole?" Ortiz nodded. "And they brought enough automated walkers, drone hives, and laser drills to do it." The room fell silent. U.S. and its allies would start on response framework. Operation Silver Aegis within hours, the U.S. and its allies convened via secure quantum link. Representatives from Japan, South Korea, Ukraine, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and NATO Europe appeared across the Situation Room display. On the far right tile sat Ukrainian President Natalia Holovenko, the first Ukrainian leader born after the nation's 2020s conflicts. Her voice cut through the tense air. If China controls the moon's south pole, she said, they control Irelium, and whoever controls Irelium controls the next century. Murmurs echoed across the delegates. President Trump raised a hand. We need a unified response. One mission, one command structure. That, said the Japanese defense minister, would be Operation Silver Aegis, a new coalition, one designed for Lunar War, more ruthless than his father. Chinese President Ch1-4 addresses his nation across the world. Billions watched the broadcast from Beijing. President Xi Longwei II, grandson of Xi Jinping, stood before a crimson banner, flanked by 4 high-ranking generals. Our scientists have discovered a resource on the moon that will uplift all mankind, Ch1-4 declared. But the Western powers seek to steal this gift from humanity. He paused knowingly. China will not allow it. Satellite imagery painted a stark contrast. Chinese forces were already fortifying Crater. The broadcast ended with a final pledge. Whoever controls the moon controls humanity's future. The U.S. and its allies would mobilize a fleet. The first phase of Operation Silver Aegis began in the early hours before dawn. Fusion tail boosters ignited across California, Australia, Japan, and Cape Canaveral. Dozens of crude interceptors, supply haulers, laser platforms, and orbital gunships lifted into the sky with no attempt at subtlety. The world watched as streaks of blue-white fire climbed into the upper stratosphere. On the deck of the USS Ohio Armstrong, a carrier-sized orbital destroyer, Commander Rhea Morgan strapped herself into the pilot cradle. Her voice crackled over the command net. This is Morgan. Chapter 3. The miners of Shackleton Crater, the moon's south pole, was a fortress of shadow, a place where sunlight skimmed the horizon like a blade, leaving the deep craters in eternal darkness. Shackleton Crater was the largest of them all, a yawning permanent night. Its walls rose like black mountains. Its floor was a frozen abyss. And buried beneath that ancient lunar ice was the metal that would change humanity's future. Helionite, 3X, a mineral with properties unlike anything found on Earth. It was stronger than titanium, lighter than carbon fiber, and, most importantly, it could stabilize quantum fusion reactors without degradation. It wasn't just valuable. It was priceless. The country that controlled Helionite, 3X, would control space itself. The mining complex, the U.S., Japan. Joint lunar extraction facilities sat on the inner rim of Shackleton Crater like a gleaming crown. Its structures were angular and silver, anchored deep into the regolith. Massive pressurized tunnels connected reactors, living quarters, and storage vaults. Bright landing pads formed a triangle pattern around the perimeter. Inside, over 400 scientists, engineers, and security personnel worked in 3 shifts, Japan handling reactor stabilization, the United States overseeing extraction robotics, and Australia managing freight operations back to orbit. For the first time in history, humanity had built a functioning multinational base on another world, and almost immediately, it had become the target of the century. Dr. Yumi Takahashi, lead Japanese physicist, Dr. Yumi Takahashi, floated gently in the micrograv lab, her dark hair drifting like ink in water. She was the world's foremost expert on Helionite, 3X stabilization. At only 41 years old, she had already received 2 Nobel Prizes, one in physics, one in materials engineering. Her voice was calm as she dictated her logbook. Sample batch 37 alpha shows a 0.2% increase in superconductor retention. This confirms a new lattice compression technique is viable. The implications for propulsion are extraordinary. She hesitated. And dangerous. Because the more they understood Helionite, 3X, the more the rest of the world wanted it. The underground rumble at 0234 station time. A tremor shook the mining complex. Not large, not violent, just a soft vibration through the floor, like a giant heartbeat deep below. Dr. Takahashi looked up, startled. Seismic activity? On the moon? Dr. Mateo Ruiz, the American geologist in charge of subsurface mapping, frowned at the instruments. No, that wasn't a quake. That was machinery. They exchanged a look. A bad one. Machinery meant someone else was digging. But nobody, officially, had permission to mine in Shackleton other than the Allied coalition. Check the far side scans, Takahashi ordered. Ruiz swallowed hard. I've been checking them every day. And Ruiz brought up the holographic display. A faint glowing line ran under the crater floor, a tunnel trajectory. A long one. Too long. Too straight. Someone's drilling horizontally, he said quietly, toward us. The secret tunnel emergency lights flickered on across the lab. Internal alarms began to sound, not loud, but sharp, precise, coded for scientists. A technical alert, not a life support alert. Takahashi's voice tightened. How long has this been happening? Ruiz exhaled slowly. At least 2 weeks. My team thought the data was noise, or a sense of malfunction. But now, he gestured at the seismic signature, still rippling across the display. Now it's unmistakable. They were being dug toward, by a rival state, by China's Black Sands Mining Division, most likely, the covert military arm of their lunar program. If China reached the Allied mining complex through a subsurface tunnel, they could breach the foundation from below. No orbital defenses, no surface patrols, no satellites would detect the approach. It would be a perfect sneak attack. The call TO orbit, Dr. Takahashi slammed her hand on the comm interface. Get me the Armstrong. Several seconds passed, the delay between lunar surface and lunar orbit. Then Captain Mara Ellison's image flickered onto the screen. She looked exhausted, armor strapped to her chest, red lights flashing behind her as her ship prepared for confrontation. Doctor, this is a bad time. We're tracking possible hostiles. This is hostile. Takahashi cut in. She transmitted the seismic data. Ellison's eyes widened. That's not a geological pattern, she whispered. That's a drill head. Takahashi nodded grimly. It's coming straight toward our main reactor vault. If they breach the foundation, we lose everything. Armstrong's response, Ellison shouted to someone off-screen. Get me tactical. Patching the Australians and the Japanese command group. A moment later, the feed stabilized. Dr. Takahashi, Ellison said, we're deploying 2-type for surface rovers and a drone squad to your location. But if China is tunneling, they may already have troops on the far side of that passage. Takahashi didn't blink. We can seal the tunnel from our side, but we need authorization to initiate a reactor vent ignition. Ellison hesitated. That could destroy half your equipment. It could save all of our lives. Ellison nodded sharply. I'll push it to Washington right now. Hold position. Reinforcements inbound. The feed cut. The lab fell silent. Deep below their feet, the mysterious drilling grew louder. The first breach minutes later, a second vibration shook the floor, harder this time. Loose instruments rattled. A toolbox fell over. Dust floated up in shimmering clouds under the artificial lights. Ruiz stiffened. They're close. Very close. Takahashi whispered, How close? Ruiz looked at the seismic chart again. His face turned white. 20 meters. Maybe less. The breach opens the floor vibrated again, this time with a sharp, metallic crack that echoed to the entire substructure. A sound that did not belong on the moon. A sound that made every nerve in the human body flinch. Ruiz backed away from the wall. Takahashi. That's them. They're cutting into the foundation plate. Another crack. Louder. Longer. Then a hiss. Faint at first, like escaping steam, except there was no steam on the moon. Just pressure equalizing. The wall panel at the far side of the reactor staging room began to bulge inward. Dust streamed from the seams. A slow, tortured bend spread across the titanium composite plating. Takahashi's voice dropped to a whisper. Everyone, back, now. They retreated behind a support pillar as the wall groaned again, metal deforming under force from the other side. And then, a cutting torch's bright arc seared through the plating. A perfect, glowing circle began carving itself from the inside out. Ruiz whispered, "Oh God, they're here." The first incursion team, the circular plate, fell inward with a heavy clank. Lunar dust scattered, and from the darkness of the freshly cut tunnel, figures emerged. Sleek armored suits, gloss black plating, cobalt visors, Chinese insignia embossed beneath layers of dust. Black Sands Division, elite lunar infiltration unit, a secret force designed for zero-atmosphere combat. Takahashi's blood ran cold. The lead soldier held a compact, matte rifle, a magnetically accelerated flechette weapon optimized for vacuum. He scanned the room with precise mechanical calm. Then he saw the reactor vault and raised his hand. 3 more soldiers emerged behind him. One carried a breaching charge. One carried equipment for sample extraction. One carried a portable core stabilizer, meant to seize raw helionite. 3X. They weren't here for sabotage. They were here to steal. The fight begins. Takahashi grabbed Ruiz by the collar and yanked him backward just as the first flechette volley cut through the air, silently, but deadly. The only sound was a ping-ping-ping of metallic darts embedding in walls. The 2 scientists dove behind a lab workstation as glass burst above their heads. Monitors shattered. Instruments disintegrated. A cascade of sparks filled the room. Takahashi hissed through clenched teeth. "They'll take the vault." Ruiz tapped his wrist console. "Security team, this is Ruiz. We have a breach in reactor staging 2. Enemy forces inside the complex." A voice answered, breathless. "We hear you, we're on the way, but we're dealing with multiple pressure failures on Deck 3. More gunfire sliced through the lab. A flechette round tore through the workstation, missing Takahashi's helmet by centimeters. Another embedded in the floor near Ruiz's knee. They couldn't wait for help. They had minutes, maybe less, before the infiltrators reached the core. The reactor fail-safes. Takahashi crawled to a side console under the table, ripping off protective panel to expose emergency subsystems. Ruiz stared. "What are you doing?" She typed frantically. "If they extract even a few grams of helionite, 3X from the core chamber, they'll have enough to fabricate a stabilizer matrix." Ruiz blinked, horrified. That would give them the tech to build their own quantum fusion engines. "Exactly. So we're not letting them take anything." The screen flashed red. A warning. A confirmation requirement. Takahashi's hands hovered over control. Her voice was low. "Steady. This will seal the chamber. Invent the outer corridor." Ruiz paled. "That could kill anyone still in the hallway." Takahashi met his eyes. "They will kill millions if they get this metal." She pressed a command. The station lights flickered. A deep rumble resonated through the floor. Mechanical shutters slammed shut across the vault door. Thick, reinforced, airtight. The Chinese infiltrators reacted immediately. The team leader barked an order in Mandarin, and 2 soldiers rushed toward the vault door, while another returned fire on the scientist's hiding place. Takahashi and Ruiz ducked again as flechettes tore through the console they just used. A rival of the security team boots thundered in the hallway. A firefight erupted just outside the staging room. Muffled blasts, powerful impact against the metal walls. Then 2 American security officers in pressurized armor dove through the doorway, sliding on the floor to take cover behind overturned equipment. They returned fire with pulse carbines, bright streaks of ionized light cutting across the lab. The Chinese soldiers scattered behind reactor conduits and broken machinery. The room erupted into a silent war, muzzle flashes without sound, punctuated only by the crack of metal under stress and the hiss of decompression warnings. 1 Chinese soldier dropped. Another charged a security officer with a combat blade designed for low gravity. The struggle sent both men drifting upward before slamming into the ceiling. The American managed to pin the attacker and fire point blank. Both fell to the ground in a heap. It was chaotic, messy, terrifying. The drill team's backup plan amid the chaos. Takahashi saw movement from the corner of her eye. The remaining Chinese soldier wasn't fighting. He was pulling a device from his pack. A sphere, black, with blinking red diodes around its equator. A microcharge, one designed for reactor casing. Her breath caught. No, he's going for the vault. Ruiz reacted instantly, grabbing a fallen security officer's sidearm. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained. But he fired anyway. The shot missed the soldier, but hit the device. The sphere sparked, flashed, then detonated prematurely, not in the vault door, but in the middle of the lab. The blast wasn't large, but in a pressurized environment, it was catastrophic. A hole ripped open in the wall. Air roared toward it. Papers, shards, loose tools, everything not bolted down surged toward the breach. Takahashi and Ruiz grabbed onto a support strut as the lab decompressed. Security officers anchored themselves to railings with maglocks. A Chinese soldier wasn't as lucky. He was sucked toward the hole, slamming violently into the edge. Alarms wailed. Red lights strobed. A synthetic voice repeated, "Atmospheric breach detected. Seal integrity compromised. Evacuate immediately." The tunnel collapsed then. A deep groan echoed to the floor again. Not from machinery. This was structural. The blast had destabilized the tunnel the infiltrators used. The walls began to buckle. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ceiling. Takahashi yelled, "Everyone out! Now!" The Americans grabbed her and Ruiz and pulled them toward the exit. The lights flickered repeatedly, then went out. Dust filled the air. Debris tumbled in slow motion under the low gravity. Behind them, the tunnel the Chinese had built collapsed inward, sealing itself under tons of lunar rock. The infiltrators who remained disappeared under collapse. The breach sealed. The attack ended. The cause they stumbled into the main corridor, panting under their helmets, armor scratched and dusty. Emergency shutters sealed behind them, isolating the destroyed lab. Ruiz leaned against the wall, shaking. That was the first wave. Takahashi nodded grimly, which means there will be a second. There was no longer any doubt. China wasn't negotiating. China wasn't waiting. China wasn't competing economically. They were coming. Now, for the moon. Chapter for the vanishing fleet. The world woke on April 9th, 2045, to a headline that rippled across every screen, every radio, every emergency broadcast channel. U.S. lunar escort fleet. Lost. No warning. No distress calls. No debris detected. An entire convoy of newly built Odyssey-class transports, carrying refined quantities of Lunarium-3, had disappeared on their return journey from the moon. The cargo alone was worth more than the GDP of some nations. But the message was far clearer. Someone wanted to cripple the Allied lunar economy, and to do it quietly. The Situation Room. President Barron Trump walked into the White House Situation Room with a look that no one had seen on him before. Not anger, not annoyance, not even theatrics. It was the unmistakable expression of a man who understood a line had been crossed. National Security Advisor Kimberly Wright spoke first. "Sir, the fleet didn't just vanish. It was erased." She brought up a holographic display, orbit lines, telemetry, final pings. Then she showed the moment everything went dead. A perfect, sharp cut, simultaneous. All ships, no time delay, no fading. "Laser interdiction," she said quietly. "Something high-powered, far beyond what we've publicly seen from China or Russia." President Trump's jaw tightened. "Where?" Wright zoomed the hologram. A small dark region, far from typical orbital traffic, blinked red. It was a dead zone, a region with no satellite coverage, no civilian sensor sweeps, no commercial mapping, a place no one had thought to watch. Until now. 11-2's message to Community Link alert chimed, the secure presidential line for foreign leader emergencies. A holographic envelope appeared. It was a pre-recorded message from President Ch1-4 of China. The president raised an eyebrow. "Play it." The hologram opened. Ch1-4 appeared, seated in a chair carved from dark lunar basalt. Behind him, a massive window overlooked Beijing's smog-cleared skyline. filtered by climate domes China had successfully built years earlier. His voice was smooth. Calm. Too calm. President Trump. A message of regret. We have detected unusual activities in cislunar space. We advise the United States to halt all aggression. The moon must remain a shared asset, free from claims of ownership or exploitation. Trump laughed softly under his breath. Shared asset? They're the ones trying to plant flags on the South Pole. Ch1-4's message continued. We are expanding our security zones around Chinese lunar facilities for safety. Any unauthorized approach will be interpreted as hostile. The message ended. Silence hung thick in the room. General Raphael Stone, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, finally spoke. That message wasn't a warning, Mr. President. It was a confession. Indirect but tactical. They want us to stand down. Because they know we won't. The first leak within hours. A satellite architecture student in Poland leaked the first clue, a faint thermal signature near the dark region where the fleet vanished. Small, focused, but unmistakably artificial. A directed energy source. Likely a lunar-anchored laser array capable of firing thousands of miles into space. The leak spread faster than any government could contain it. Within minutes, Twitter, TikTok, Telegram, forums, analysts all pointed to one conclusion. China had deployed a secret space-based weapon system. World markets panicked. Allied nations demanded answers. And the U.S. Space Force urged action. The moon quarantine proposal President Trump slammed his hand lightly on the table. Enough. We're done reacting. It's time to lead. He turned to General Stone. Draft the order. I want a moon quarantine zone. Anything that comes within 500 kilometers of our lunar territory gets stopped. The room froze. Kimberly Wright whispered, Sir, that's an act of war. Trump's reply was cold, precise. They already fired the first shot. I'm just drawing a line where they can see it. In Beijing, while Washington debated, Beijing celebrated quietly. Ch1-4 stood on a balcony overlooking the Capitol as his defense chiefs congratulated him. The Americans will not risk full confrontation. One general said confidently. They are stretched thin. Their allies are disorganized. Their economy is divided. Ch1-4 only smiled. Do not underestimate a cornered nation, he said. They can be unpredictable. Yet he was certain of one thing. The U.S. would hesitate. The U.S. would take time. Time China intended to use. For construction. For militarization. For expansion. For seizing the lunar South Pole entirely. The president's decision back in Washington. The president stared at the holographic projection of the moon, glowing blue, white, and gray in the Situation Room's dim light. He didn't speak for nearly 20 seconds. Then, send the order. General Stone saluted. Yes, Mr. President. And just like that, the moon became the most dangerous place in the solar system. Chapter 5, The Shadows over Mare Tranquillitatis. The moon hung silently in the void, cold, ancient, indifferent, but the space around it was beginning to simmer with tension. Radar sweeps from U.S. Lunar Command detected movements that didn't match any established flight paths. Small, unregistered, fast, drones, dozens of them, scattered like metallic insects across Mare Tranquillitatis. But these weren't American, nor Japanese, nor South Korean. These drones had no transponders, no ID signatures, and no predictable flight pattern. They were scouting, measuring, mapping, prepping the battlefield. The Covington Docking Platform Commander Lara Covington, the highest-ranking Space Force officer stationed on the moon, stood inside the panoramic control deck of Tranquility Base 2, the largest U.S. lunar installation. Outside the massive shielded windows, the gray horizon stretched endlessly. It looked peaceful, still, dead, but Alara knew better. Nothing stays peaceful, she muttered. Not where there's money involved. And Lunarium 3 wasn't just money. It was power, influence, a material that made nuclear fusion cheap, rocket engines efficient, and entire nations rich. It was a kind of resource that centuries of human history had shown nations would kill for. The unmarked signal commander, her deputy called from the comm station. We have another ping. Same pattern. Ilera walked over. Source: unknown, but it's definitely Chinese in origin. Encryption matches the signature format used by their lunar robotics division. Ilera exhaled slowly. They're probing us. Her deputy nodded. It's not just probing, ma'am. It's staging. A soft alarm chimed. A new alert appeared. 27 additional drones had emerged from the dark side of the moon, all headed toward U.S. territory. Ilera tapped the console. Flag it. Earth needs to know. Back on Earth, a global shift in Washington. President Barron Trump received the update during a briefing with the Joint Chiefs. General Stone read the classified report aloud. China has deployed unmanned reconnaissance units over Mare Tranquillitatis. Numbers increasing. Trajectory suggests a major expansion of their lunar footprint. The president stared at the holographic map as red dots spread across the lunar surface. Looks like termites, he whispered. Stone tried to keep a straight face. Sir, we believe these drones are mapping structural weaknesses in our bases. Trump raised an eyebrow. Like termites? No one laughed. Wright leaned in. They're preparing for something. Something bigger than anyone expected. The breakdown in diplomacy 3 hours later. The United States requested an emergency diplomatic call with China. She too refused. A single message came through instead, routed through Switzerland. China is conducting peaceful exploration. Any American interference will be met with countermeasures. President Trump scoffed. Peaceful doesn't involve erasing fleets. General Stone stepped forward. Sir, we need to intercept those drones before they reach Tranquility Base. Trump nodded. Do it. Quietly. No explosions. No fireworks. I don't want the media screaming World War III before breakfast. Operation Veil Cutter U.S. Lunar Command initiated a covert operation using a new class of silent, non-reflective microsatellites called Spectre units, designed for stealth, built to be invisible to radar, able to disable electronics using pinpoint EMP bursts. Perfect for the situation. Ilera watched from the command deck as 30 Spectre units launched from their concealed bay. They moved like shadows, silent streaks gliding across the lunar sky. Target lock confirmed. Her deputy said, Execute. Ilera ordered. One by one, the Chinese drones flickered, blinking, stuttering, dying. But something unexpected happened. The counter-ambush from beyond the lunar ridge, hidden until now, for large objects rose into the horizon, massive, angular, built like floating fortresses. Ilera zoomed the camera. Are those... Her deputy swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Chinese lunar assault platforms. First of their kind. Each platform housed 6 high-powered laser turrets, anti-satellite missiles, drone factories, and they weren't defensive. They were invading, moving directly toward the American base. Earth Reactor data feed hit Washington within minutes. An emergency meeting was called instantly. Wright appeared pale. General Stone's voice shook with controlled fury. Sir, China is preparing to seize Mare Tranquillitatis completely. The assault platforms are less than 8 hours from weapons range. President Trump stared at the lunar map, at the red shapes encroaching, at the blue line shrinking. For decades, he said quietly, people argued that space militarization was a distant threat. He looked up. Seems pretty close to me. Then he stood and placed his hands on the table. Get Japan on the line. Call NATO. Call Australia. Call everyone. Everyone, sir? Stone asked. Trump nodded. Everyone. The alliance awakens within 12 hours. The first coordinated Allied response in space history began mobilizing. German orbital interceptors activated their defense nets. Japan prepared its new Raging-class energy cruisers. South Korea scrambled deep space strike drones. Australia prepped its lunar rescue ships. Ukraine launched its experimental fusion-powered interceptor. For the first time since World War II, the world was forming a unified military stance. Not on Earth, but on the moon. Ilera's message home knowing what was coming. Commander Ilera Covington sat at a small desk inside her quarters. She activated a private recording device. To my family, if you ever get this, just know, Her voice cracked slightly. She steadied herself. Just know we're doing this for the future. For humanity. For everything the moon could be. She ended the recording, took a breath, and walked back onto command deck. Status. Chinese assault platforms now at 7 hours distance, her deputy said. Spectre units recharging. Allied reinforcements incoming. Ilera tightened her gloves. Prep the shields. Warmi de Hayuguns. And get every engineer in a suit. I want redundancy checks across all systems. She exhaled. This is going to get ugly. The night before the first lunar battle, she stared out the viewport as the platforms grew closer, small black shapes emerging against the shimmering curve of the moon. Quiet, steady, purposeful. The first shots of the war were coming, and the moon would never be the same. Chapter 6, the first shots on the moon sky, black, infinite, unforgiving, shimmered faintly as the first wave of Chinese assault platforms crossed into visual range of Tranquility Base 2. At this distance, they looked small, almost harmless, but everyone on the base knew the truth. They were giants. Each platform carried enough firepower to melt a crater into the lunar surface, enough to punch through base armor, enough to kill thousands in seconds if they managed a direct hit. Commander Ilera Covington stood on the primary observation deck as the enemy drew closer. Lights on their surface flickered like distant stars, steady, deliberate, and cold. Lieutenant Harris swallowed hard. Range, 250 kilometers and closing. Ilera nodded slowly. They're testing our nerves. And our patience, Harris added. Ilera folded her arms. Let them. Earth coordinates a response in Washington. The Pentagon buzzed with frantic motion. President Barron Trump paced around the Situation Room, watching the assault platforms glide toward the American base. His voice was low, almost growling. General Stone, tell me we have something ready. Stone stepped forward. We do, Sir. Operation Silver Spire. Full-spectrum joint strike package. NATO, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and Ukraine have all committed. Trump turned. Capabilities? Wright brought up a hologram. Blue Allied icons. Red enemy signatures. All converging over the moon like opposing storms. Japan's raging-class cruisers are preparing orbital firing solutions. NATO rail slingers are charging. South Korea has drone carriers ready. Australia is launching 2 emergency medical ships. Ukraine's fusion interceptor, Cobalt 1, is already en route. And the U.S.? Trump asked. Stone gave a thin smile. We got the Aegis lunar defense net for kinetic arrays and the new Gauss Lance prototype. Trump nodded. Good. Then let's punch back. Hard. On the moon, final preparations, Ilera walked the engineering bay. Technicians floated in low gravity, securing cables, checking pressure seals, and arming the base's defensive railguns. Chief Engineer Ramos saluted. All redundant systems green. Shields at 97% railguns charged. Mining drones converted to decoys. Good, Ilera said. How long until the Spectre units recharge? 2 hours. Ilera frowned. That's too long. They drained themselves disabling those earlier drones, Ramos replied. No system was designed for that kind of load. Ilera rubbed her temples. We'll have to make do without them. Harris jogged inside. Helmet clipped to his hip. Commander, movement. Ilera's stomach tightened. Where? Enemy drones. A full swarm, coming in low across the crater rim. The swarm arrives, they poured over the ridge like a metallic avalanche. Hundreds of them, small, silver, angular, reflecting sunlight like shards of broken glass. Jesus, Harris whispered. There must be 500 of them. Ilera didn't flinch. Opened fire. Railguns rumbled, silent in the vacuum but roaring through the base structure. White streaks of hyper-accelerated tungsten ripped across the horizon. Dozens of drones shattered instantly. Brilliant flashes. Spinning debris. But the swarm shifted formation, condensed, then corkscrewed downward. Impact in 90 seconds. Harris yelled, "Activate the shield grid." Ilera ordered. A shimmering dome flickered to life above the base. Thin, fragile, not designed for the scale of assault. Earth sees the attack live. The Situation Room fell silent as the swarm darkened the lunar horizon. Wright pushed up her glasses. This is the largest coordinated drone assault in history. President Trump clenched his jaw, and we're watching it happen live. Sir, Stone warned, if those drones breach the base, casualties will be catastrophic. Trump slammed the table, then stopped them. Stone nodded. Allied units will reach lunar orbit in 15 minutes. 15 minutes is forever up there. Wright whispered. Back on the moon, breached the first wave slammed into the shield. White flashes. Static bursts. The dome flickered violently. Ilera gripped the railing. Hold. Hold. The shield collapsed. The second wave tore into the base's armor. Panels flew. Dust erupted. Vents ruptured. One drone speared directly into Habitat Ring B. Red light strobed. Breach compartment. Harris shouted. Pressure falling. Seal it. Ilera barked. Bulkhead slammed shut. 2 engineers were yanked through just in time. But the swarm kept coming. A third wave hit the railgun towers. One erupted in a silent explosion. Another went offline. Ilera's voice trembled. We can't take another hit like that. Harris shouted, Commander, Allied reinforcements entering lunar orbit. Ilera exhaled a long, shaky breath. Then we just need to survive the next 60 seconds. The Allies arrived, 3 streaks of blue light, sliced across the black sky. Japan's Raijin cruisers. South Korea's drone carriers. Ukraine's glowing fusion interceptor. They dove toward the Chinese platforms, weapons hot. Ilera stared upward. About damn time. The cruisers opened fire. Brilliant energy beams cut across space, illuminating the lunar surface like a fall sunrise. And the first lunar battle officially began. Chapter 7. The First Lunar Skirmish. Chapter 7. The First Lunar Skirmish. The silence of the moon was absolute. No wind, no sound, only the faint tremor of distant machinery buried beneath Mare Serenitatis, the hidden heartbeat of the new war. For weeks, both coalitions had maneuvered in shadows. Recon drones drifted low through the black horizon. Stealth landers hopped crater to crater. And every nation kept one eye fixed on the newly discovered metal, helionite, the impossibly light, incredibly strong element woven deep in ancient lunar rock. It was the reason they were here, the reason the world had changed, and the reason the moon, once quiet and untouched, now felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark came in the early hours of April 4th, 2045, as Earthlight barely touched the rim of the Sea of Tranquility. Inside Artemis Command Base, Colonel Marissa Hale stood over the holographic map, watching a red icon flicker to life. Chinese rover detachment crossing Sector Delta 7. A technician announced. 3 units, heavy signatures, could be armored. Hale narrowed her eyes. Armored rovers is deep. They're testing us. Behind her, Commander Kenji Sato of the Japanese Space Force leaned in. That's not a test. That's a claim. Minutes later, alarms pulsed through the American-Japanese NATO outpost. Pressure doors sealed. Troops rushed into exo-armor suits, the new EVA Mark VI, built for both vacuum survival and combat. A squad of 12 prepared for deployment. Among them was Staff Sergeant Diego Renteria, veteran of the Pacific Cyber Fronts. He checked his magnetic stabilized rail rifle, glanced at the others, and nodded. No one fires unless fired upon. Hale reminded them over comms. But if they push the ridge, you hold it. The lunar surface, Delta 7 sector, the squad's dropcraft descended with barely a whisper, gasless, silent, using microthrusters to avoid detection. The ramp opened. The squad stepped into blackness. Only helmet lights and Earth's glow cut through the void. Sato's voice crackled through. Chinese units are 200 meters ahead. Expect armored shells and laser cutters. Renteria raised his hand, signaling a halt. They're over the ridge. 3 massive shapes crawled into view. Chinese type, 92 lunar armor prospectors. Technically mining vehicles. But their drill arms had been replaced with beam projectors. They were weaponized. The lead rover activated a blinding spotlight. It swept across the ridge, then locked directly onto the U.S.-Japan. Squad. Everyone froze. Tension built like a coil ready to snap. A message transmitted through wideband comms. It was short, flat, and unmistakably hostile. Withdraw. This territory belongs to the People's Lunar Authority. Colonel Hale answered immediately. This is international territory under Artemis Treaty jurisdiction. Withdraw your vehicles. The Chinese rover repeated the message. Then again, on the fourth repetition, its forward laser turret powered up slowly, deliberately, leaving no doubt. Renteria whispered, "Ma'am, they're baiting us." Then it happened. A sudden flash of blue light sliced through the darkness, a laser high intensity, narrowly missing the squad's flank. "Contact! They've fired!" Sato shouted. The U.S.-Japan. Squad dug for crater cover as more beams cut across the ridge. Renteria braced, aimed, and fired the first non-lethal counter, a burst of electromagnetic pulses meant to disable the rover's optics. Hit! The rover reeled, turret flickering. Another squad member launched a micro-drone swarm, metallic silver insects swirling silently toward the vehicles. They detonated EMP charges across the hulls. One rover went dark entirely. The other two pivoted, firing wildly across the crater. Laser beams skimmed the lunar dust, turning small rocks into glowing vapor. Renteria fired a round that struck the exposed wheel joint of the second rover, a direct hit. The machine lurched sideways, skidding against the crater wall. Then came a shock wave, but there was no sound, only the vibration felt through their boots. The third rover activated a seismic pod, destabilizing the ridge. Dust cascaded downward as the slope gave way. Fall back. New position. Hale ordered. The squad scrambled to higher ground. The Chinese machines reversed abruptly, retreating, limping, sparking. Within minutes, they vanished over the ridge. Silence returned, but the damage was done. The first shots of the Lunar War had been exchanged. Artemis Command. Minutes later, Colonel Hale stared at the report table, jaw clenched. 3 disabled. No casualties, but they initiated. Commander Sato folded his arms. They'll claim we fired first. Hale didn't look up. They always do. Behind them, analysts pulled new satellite feeds from lunar orbit. Red markers appeared, one after another. Chinese troop landers, Russian lunar drones, North Korean artillery pods. President Barron Trump's voice came through secure line. Hale, Sato, prepared to defend Artemis Base. She the second just declared a protective operation across the moon. Hale exhaled slowly. So it begins. Chapter 8. The Siege of Artemis Base. Chapter 8. The Siege of Artemis Base. The alarms inside Artemis Command Base pulsed with a rhythmic, bone-deep urgency. Not loud. Nothing was loud on the moon, but insistent, vibrating through the metal floor plates and into the boots of every soldier and technician inside. Colonel Marissa Hale stood over the tactical display as more red icons appeared. Chinese drop pods, Russian drone clusters, North Korean artillery nodes burrowing into crater shadows like metallic insects. And behind them all, one looming shape, a massive lander, the PRC Heaven Lance, a mobile command fortress bristling with high-energy laser arrays. Commander Kenji Sato stepped up beside her. That thing has enough power to glass our entire base shield. If they get it within range, Artemis is done. Hale didn't flinch. We won't let it get that close. The Alliance prepares across Artemis Base. Allied troops hurried into their EVA battle suits. The U.S. Space Marine Corps, Japan's Lunar Defense Force, NATO's Combined Security Battalions, Australia's hardened lunar engineers wielding seismic charges, and a small but fierce Ukrainian detachment, veterans of trench warfare now fighting on a world with no air. Renteria jogged toward his squad rendezvous point, helmet tucked under his arm. "Is it true?" Sergeant Ishikawa called out. "They're bringing the Heaven Lance?" Renteria nodded. "Oh, it's here. I saw the heat signature myself." Ishikawa swore in Japanese. That thing could have ended the Pacific War by itself. Renteria sealed his helmet. That's why we're stopping it. Lunar orbit. Skyguard fleet high above the moon. The U.S. and Allied orbital forces reoriented. The Skyguard constellation, America's new generation of laser defense satellites, shifted into position. On board the command ship, USSF Horizon. 3. Admiral Yara Beck watched the telemetry. Target grid acquired. Her officer reported. Chinese armor advancing in 4 spearheads. Russian drones supporting. They're forming a pincer around Artemis base. Beck folded her hands. The first real battle of the moon, and they mean to make it historic. She leaned forward. Activate orbital defensive posture. No lethal strikes unless Artemis base is breached, but suppress every enemy sensor and drone you can. Yes, Admiral. In orbit, beams of blue-white light land silently across the void, disabling Russian reconnaissance drones and blinding Chinese targeting systems. For the first time in human history, a war was being fought simultaneously on the lunar surface and in lunar orbit. Approach of the Heaven Lance back on the ground. The rumble began. Not sound, but vibration. A massive silhouette crested the horizon beyond the crater ridge. The Chinese command fortress, the Heaven Lance, moved on 8 reinforced legs, each step pulverizing regolith beneath it. Its primary laser array rotated, reflecting faint Earthlight, like the eye of a predator searching for prey. Sato whispered into comms. They're bringing it into firing range. Hale didn't hesitate. All units, prepare Phase 1 engagement. Phase 1. Shadow line ambush. 3 Allied squads took position along the shadow line, the thin boundary where sunlight met darkness. The troops concealed themselves in absolute black, using thermal dampeners to appear like empty rock. Renteria crouched behind a jagged boulder. His heart rate spiked, but he breathed slowly, controlled the way he'd been trained. Across the ridge, Chinese lunar infantry in silver exosuits advanced in tight formation. No footsteps, only drifting puffs of dust with each movement. Hale's voice came through. Hold fire. Let them commit. The Chinese formation pushed deeper into the shadow. Unaware. Closer. Closer. Now. Renteria and his squad burst from the darkness, rail rifles lighting up in brilliant arcs. Electromagnetic rounds pinged off Chinese armor, disorienting their sensors. Japan's Ishikawa activated a micro-drone swarm that cut to the front line like a cloud of razor light. North Korean artillery pods fired from a distant crater. Shells erupted silently. Shock waves felt through their suits. The battlefield danced with strobing flashes of light, not sound, making it surreal, almost dreamlike. Phase 2. Target the legs of Heaven Lance had entered its firing posture. Target its locomotion. Legs only, Hale commanded. Australian engineers sprinted across low-gravity terrain, carrying seismic charges the size of briefcases. A Ukrainian sniper team, perched on a ridge, fired hypervelocity rounds at the Lance's knee joints. One round struck perfectly, shearing a hydraulic line. The fortress staggered. The Australians reached the nearest leg. Were planning charges. 30 seconds. Chinese exo troops converged. Renteria fired covering shots, pushing himself higher with each recoil, hopping in low lunar gravity like a controlled ascent. 10 seconds. Artillery shook the ground. 5. Fall back. Hale ordered. The engineers dug behind a ridge. The charges detonated silently, but the shock rippled through the regolith. One massive leg buckled. The Heaven Lance lurched sideways, scraping a trench into the lunar soil. Cheers erupted across Allied comms, but they ended abruptly, because the fortress stabilized itself, rotating, repositioning its giant laser array. Sato's voice tightened. It's charging its primary beam. Hale's breath caught. Everyone brace. Phase 3. Orbital intervention in lunar orbit. Admiral Beck watched the data spike. The Lance is about to fire, an officer shouted. Beck closed her eyes for half a second. Then she made the call that would be studied in military academies for centuries. Override restrictions. Skyguard, fire at will. 3 orbital lasers converged on the Heaven Lance. Brilliant streaks of light pierced the darkness. On the ground, the fortress glowed, its shielding flaring with blue sparks. For a moment, it held. For a moment, it resisted. Then the shield collapsed, and the lance's primary beam destabilized, backfiring inside the array. A blinding burst of white light tore across the horizon, illuminating the crater like a second sunrise. When the brightness faded, the heaven lance was toppled, crippled, smoking, silent. Artemis Base had survived the first siege, but Hale knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 9. The Fall of Mare Imbrium. Chapter 9. The Fall of Mare Imbrium. The wreck of the heaven land still smoldered in the crater's shadows as dawn, a faint white glow, crept across Mare Imbrium. But there was no celebration inside Artemis Base. No feeling of victory. Everyone knew the same truth. The enemy had more, much more. The Imbrium breach at 0410 UTC. Sensors across the basin lit up. Dozens of red markers. Then hundreds. Colonel Hale leaned over the tactical display, eyes narrowing. Are those mining transports? The analyst shook his head. No, ma'am. Combat landers disguised as mining vessels. Chinese signatures mixed with Russian thermal shields. They're coming in low, riding the curvature of the basin. Commander Sato exhaled sharply. It's a saturation landing. They're not probing anymore. They're taking Imbrium. Hale stood straight. Give me the president. The Situation Room. Washington, D.C. President Barron Trump appeared on the secure hololink. Hair silver with age, but eyes sharp, focused. Hale, Sato briefed me. Hale didn't sugarcoat it. Sir, China and Russia are deploying a massive ground force to Mare Imbrium. We estimate 8,000 troops by the end of the hour. Their objective is total control of the basin. If they hold it, they can reach the helionite veins before we can stop them. Trump nodded slowly. Do we have enough to hold? Sato glanced at Hale. No, Mr. President. Not without reinforcements. Trump's lips tightened. The Pacific Battle Group is still days away. NATO's launch window isn't until tomorrow. You'll be on your own. Hale didn't blink. Then we'll buy you the time. The battle for the basin begins the first Chinese-Russian landing wave touched down in coordinated formation across the vast plain of Mare Imbrium. Each lander kicked up enormous plumes of dust, obscuring everything in a swirling gray storm. From within the haze, lunar infantry marched forward with precision. Chinese Vanguard suits, heavier than American models, with dual shoulder-mounted lasers. Russian Cosmos Berserkers, exosuits built for brute force, capable of lifting a lunar rover overhead. North Korean artillery pods unfolded like metallic spiders, burying themselves for cover. The coalition had come in full power. Renteria and his squad crouched behind a low crater ridge, watching the silhouettes emerge. Ishikawa whispered, "They're bringing half the Eastern Bloc with them." Renteria swallowed. "That's okay. We've beaten worse." He didn't believe it, but he needed to say it. Allied counterstrike. Operation Black Horizon. Colonel Hale activated the base intercom. All units. This is Artemis Command. The enemy is making a full-scale push on Mare Imbrium. We will not let them reach the helionite veins. Prepare to execute Operation Black Horizon. Across the base, troops braced for deployment. Black Horizon had been planned for months. A high-speed, multinational counterattack, using lunar mobility rigs and kinetic gliders. Dozens of troops mounted the rigs, lightweight frames that allowed soldiers to sprint across the lunar surface at 50 miles per hour. On my mark, Hale said quietly, "Go." The rigs launched forward in near silence. Dozens of soldiers streaking across the basin, under Earthlight like a wave of shadows. Above them, NATO kinetic gliders swooped in low, dropping smart mines that burrowed into the ground before activating. The first attachments of Chinese infantry didn't see them until it was too late. Magnetic grenades detonated along their flank. EMP bursts knocked out several Russian Berserker suits. But the victory was short-lived, because the second wave was already descending, and it was far larger. The Eastern superweapon. The Jade Maul. Hale's eyes widened as a colossal shadow blocked Earthlight. "What is that?" Sato muttered. The scanners answered for him. A massive lander. larger than a heaven lance, descending with stabilizer beams cutting through the dust storm. Its designation appeared in Mandarin across the tactical map. Irdui, the Jade Maul Russia's signature, was woven through its systems. North Korea's artillery implants were visible on its underside. This was a joint superweapon, 20 times the mass of a standard lander, too big to move quickly, but devastating once anchored. If it touched down, the entire basin could fall. Desperate measures Hale made a decision instantly. All units target the Jade Maul. But Sato grabbed her arm. Marissa, if that thing is protected by Russian hard shields, our weapons won't even scratch it. Hale stared at the glowing Titan, descending slowly. Then we aim for the thrusters. Bring it down before it lands. Renteria and Ishikawa immediately deployed a long-range rail cannon. They set up on a ridge, bracing its legs deep into regolith. Targeting thruster cluster Alpha, Ishikawa said. Renteria squeezed the trigger. The round streaked upward, a faint blue blur, and struck one of the thrusters. A plume of flame spewed sideways, destabilizing the monster. But it was not enough. The Maul adjusted, correcting its descent. Another shot. Another. Chinese intercept drones shredded the rounds before they could hit. Sato growled in frustration. We can't stop it. Hale's voice came through, cold, steady. There's one more option. Everyone listened. Admiral Beck, prepare orbital strike protocol Omega-7. Beck's voice came back immediately. Hale, that's a kinetic strike. A lunar rod drop. If we miss, if the debris scatters, it could hit Artemis itself. I know, Hale said quietly. Do it anyway. Impact far above, the Skyguard satellites repositioned. A tungsten rod, 10 meters long, disengaged from its magnetic cradle. It began its silent fall toward the moon. Alarms screamed across Chinese and Russian channels. The Jade Maul attempted emergency evasive thruster burn. Too slow. The rod struck. A white flash. A shock wave through the regolith. A plume rising like a volcanic eruption. When the dust cleared, the Jade Maul was gone. A crater in its place. But so were dozens of Allied troops caught in the blast radius. Renteria stared at the smoking basin in horror. Ishikawa whispered, God, what have we done? The basin falls and Hale received the final update. A Chinese mechanized attachment had moved through a western corridor unnoticed during the chaos. They had reached the first helionite vein. Mare Imbrium, strategically, economically, and symbolically, had fallen. Chapter 10. The shadow of Tycho. The moon's southern highlands were silent. Not the silence of peace, but the silence before an impact. Tycho crater stretched beneath the stars like a massive scar, its central peak rising like the spine of a buried titan. This was where the Allies had traced the last encrypted burst from China's hidden lunar division, and it was here that General Aoki insisted the coalition must investigate at once. President Barron Trump listened by encrypted link from the White House Lunar Command Room. His voice was steady, but strained. General, whatever China is hiding down there, we need eyes on it. Confirm it. Expose it. Before they use it. The order was given. America's Lunar Force, the 322nd Orbital Ranger Battalion, deployed within the hour. Landing at the crater edge, the transports descended silently, engines throttled low to avoid detection. Inside the lead craft, Major Elias Ward reviewed the updated threat maps. Thermal activity, 2 kilometers beneath the crater floor. Ward read aloud. How the hell are they tunneling at that depth? No one answered, because everyone already feared the answer. China, Russia, and North Korea had combined their engineering divisions. This wasn't just a base. It was something far worse. The ramp lowered. Gray dust swirled in the low gravity as the Rangers stepped out, their visors glowing with HUD data. Above them, the Earth hung like a pale blue lantern. Below, Tycho's dark pit waited, breathing. The discovery of the Rangers rappelled down the crater wall, using micro-thrusters to stabilize their descent. The dust was thicker here, like ash, as if something had burned inside the crater long ago, or very recently. Major Ward, you need to see this. Ward drifted down to the signal. A ranger was brushing away dust from a partially buried object. It wasn't rock. It wasn't metal. It was machined alloy, smooth, precise, advanced. A hatchway, partially collapsed but unmistakable. A secret entrance. Ward swallowed, scanned for power signatures. His helmet chimed. A surge of energy pulsed beneath their feet. Slow, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a machine. Ward stepped back. This isn't just a bunker. It's a reactor. Crystal 9. The weaponization plan 2 Rangers pried open a hatch. A wave of cold vapor drifted out, not air, but a refrigerant system designed to keep something incredibly hot. Contained. Inside, they found it. Rows of crystalline rods, pulsing with faint blue light. Ward's eyes widened. Crystal 9, but refined. This wasn't mining stock. This was engineered. This was fuel. He tapped into the data console. The interface was in Mandarin. A translator AI worked quickly. The screen displayed a schematic. A weapon. A colossal one. A lunar surface cannon, using Crystal 9 as its amplification core. The system was codenamed Ch1-4, the Heavenly Dragon. Ward felt his breath catch. A laser that big. It could hit satellites, orbital stations, or Earth. A ranger whispered, "Sir, this is a planetary strike weapon." And then the lights dimmed. The floor vibrated. The reactor was powering up. "Enemy contact movement," a ranger yelled. Thermal signatures appeared on their HUDs, dozens of them, rushing through the tunnels. Chinese lunar shock troops. Armored, silent, deadly. Ward raised his rifle. "All units. Defensive scatter. Hold the line." The battle erupted instantly. Silent flashes, muted thuds, bodies drifting in low gravity. Ward fired burst after burst, watching enemy helmets crack in geyser vapor. But more kept coming. And behind them, a massive exosuit lumbered through the tunnel. A Titan-class lunar combat exoframe, 8 meters tall, armed with dual plasma accelerators. Ward whispered, "Oh hell." The reactor countdown behind the battle. The reactor hummed louder. A timer appeared on the wall screens. Ward didn't read Mandarin, but the numbers needed no translation. A countdown, less than 30 minutes. If the Heavenly Dragon reached full power, it could fire its first test shot, almost certainly at an allied target, possibly at Earth. Ward opened a channel. "Command, this is Ward. China is about to activate a Crystal 9 megaweapon. We need immediate bombardment authorization." Static, solar interference. The same interference China used to hide their fleet earlier. There was no response. Ward looked at his troops. Dust floated through the air like drifting sparks. The Titan exosuit took another step forward, shaking the tunnel. "We're not getting backup. We shut this down ourselves." The decision Ward switched to squad-wide comms. "All units, listen up. If that reactor goes critical, crystal amplification will spike. It'll melt half this crater and energize the cannon. Our only chance is to destroy it now." A ranger responded, voice trembling. "You mean blow it up with us still inside?" Ward inhaled slowly. "Yes." Silence. Then, one by one, ranger visors nodded. Not because they wanted to die, but because they understood. The entire coalition depended on this moment. The charge Ward pointed toward the reactor. "Set demolition charges. We overload the crystal and collapse the facility." Rangers moved, planting kinetic breaching cores around the reactor housing. The exosuit roared, charging its plasma cannons. The countdown hit. For minutes 12 seconds. "Fire teams Alpha and Bravo. Distract the Titan." Ward ordered. "I'll finish the reactor." Rangers unleashed a flurry of rail rounds, sparks dancing across the Titan's armor. The giant swatted 2 men aside with its arm, sending them spinning into the air. Ward reached the central control node. He pulled the panel open. The crystal pulsed like a beating star. The timer continued. 3 minutes 01 seconds. Ward punched the manual override. He slammed the detonator into the control socket. Arming sequence initiated. He exhaled, shaking. Charges are set. Good, Ward whispered. Then we're done here. Extraction. Denied. Ward. Open comms again. Command, we need emergency extraction now. The reactor is rigged. Static. Then a faint voice cut through. Ward, we read you. Hold POS. Signal lost. The team stared at one another. Somewhere above them, Allied dropships were trying to reach through interference, trying to find them, trying to save them. But the clock was ticking down. 1 minute, 37 seconds. Ward clenched his jaw. Rangers, prepare for final defensive posture. We hold until the end. The unexpected signal, and then a burst of encrypted comms came through. Clear, strong, impossible. It was General Aoki, speaking from the Japanese command frigate Nagata. Major Ward. Stand by. Ward blinked. General? How? Aoki's voice was calm, because he was a man who had already made his peace with consequences. We have found a way to pierce the interference. Hold your position for 90 seconds. Ward looked at the timer. 1 minute, 21 seconds. He shook his head. There won't be anything left in 90 seconds, General. Aoki answered quietly. Then I will not waste them. A rescue is coming. The line cut. The Rangers stared upward as the tunnel trembled. Something massive was descending through the crater, and as the reactor lights flickered, as the Titan exosuit prepared one final charge, as the countdown hit 53 seconds, a shadow fell over them. A huge one, a dropship, not American, not European, not Australian, but Japanese. The Shoryu-class heavy lunar lander, a prototype never before used in combat. Its side doors exploded open. Grapple lines dropped. Marines leaned out, waving frantically. Ward exhaled. Move! 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 Rangers leapt, grabbed the lines, and were yanked into the lander. Ward was the last one. He looked back at the reactor, glowing brighter now. The countdown hit 18 seconds. Ward jumped. The hatch slammed shut. Full power. Get U.S. out of here. The lander blasted upward, engines screaming. The crater shook behind them. The Titan exosuit tried to leap the craft, but fell short by meters. And then the charges blew. A blinding sphere of blue-white light erupted from Tycho crater, followed by a wave of dust that rose like a tidal wall into the sky. The heavenly dragon cannon was destroyed. The lander cleared the crater by seconds, engines overheating as the shockwave hurled dust 50 kilometers high. Inside, Ward collapsed to the deck, breathing hard, shaking, alive. General Aoki's voice came to the comms again, soft but steady. Welcome home, Rangers. You have changed the course of this war. Chapter 11, The Dragon's Answer. The destruction of the heavenly dragon cannon sent shockwaves across the solar system. Not just literal shockwaves rising from Tycho crater, but political ones, military ones, and psychological ones. For the first time since the war began, China had suffered a strategic loss so severe it couldn't be hidden, and Beijing was furious. The emergency meeting in Beijing in the Zongnanhai Command Compound, deep beneath reinforced earth. President Ch1-4 sat ahead of a triangular table. His eyes were cold, unmoving, fixed on a holoscreen showing the obliterated remains of the Tycho installation. Around him, China's top generals and political strategists sat in uneasy silence. General Hao Qing finally spoke. Mr. President, the Americans and their allies have discovered our primary reactor. The Tycho weapon cannot be rebuilt in time. Ch1-4 did not blink. Can it be rebuilt at all? Hao hesitated. Only with a new supply of refined crystal 9. Ch1-4 leaned forward. His voice became a whisper, deadly calm. Then we will take the supply they have found. If they can mine it, so can we. He pointed toward the map of the moon's far side, specifically the region where U.S. and Japanese prospecting teams had detected the richest deposits of Crystal 9, the Montez Rook Formation, deep, ancient, and now a battleground. The coalition briefing. USS Armstrong Command Deck General Oki stood next to U.S. Space Force Admiral Harrington aboard the USS Armstrong. the coalition's flagship in lunar orbit. The room was dim, lit only by holograms of troop movements, Chinese fleet signatures, and thermal scans from the moon's far side. Aoki spoke first. China lost their superweapon. They will not allow this humiliation to stand. Admiral Harrington folded his arms. They're already mobilizing. We're picking up mass drivers powering up at their Mare Imbrium base. Looks like they're preparing a kinetic strike. Aoki exhaled slowly. If they fire on our positions, it won't be a warning shot. It will be war without limit. President Barron Trump's hologram shimmered to life above the table. His face was serious, different from the confident tone he normally used during public addresses. General Aoki, Admiral Harrington. America and its allies will not retreat from the moon. Not now. Not ever. He lowered his voice. You have full authority to intercept any strike and prevent China from taking the Crystal 9 deposits. The commanders nodded because they knew what the president really meant. The next battle would decide the momentum of the entire war. Far side deployment. The Marines returned Major Elias Ward, still bruised from the Tycho escape, stood with his squad aboard a transport descending toward the Montes Rook frontier. The terrain beneath them was jagged, shattered by millions of years of asteroid impacts. No communication with Earth. No sunlight for days at a time. No easy retreat. Perfect ground for a disaster. Or a victory. Ward's second-in-command, Lieutenant Mara Solis, approached him. Her visor was cracked from the Tycho battle, but she refused to replace it. A badge of survival. Major, our recon drone spotted something. She pulled up a projection. Rows of heat signatures. Marching in tight, coordinated formations. Hundreds. No! Thousands of them. Ward frowned. These aren't Chinese. Mara nodded. Russian lunar armored infantry. And North Korean plasma teams behind them. Ward clenched his jaw. China brought his friends. Mara smirked. Then so did we. The transport doors opened. U.S. orbital rangers, Japanese lunar mechanized, Australian shock troopers, and a Ukrainian engineering brigade descended together, their boots hitting the gray dust with unified purpose. Ward looked across the horizon. He could feel the next battle approaching, like electricity in the air. The first strike at 0435 Lunar Standard Time. It happened. A blinding blue flash appeared over the ridge. Then silence. Then impact. The ground trembled. Dust erupted upward in slow, drifting plumes. Mass driver strike. Solis shouted. Brace. A kinetic projectile slammed into the surface less than a kilometer away, carving a crater the size of a small stadium. Shrapnel, razor-sharp lunar rock, blasted outward in all directions. Ward hit the ground, his suit's magnetic feet locking to the surface. The shock wave washed over him. Everyone maintain formation, he shouted. We moved to cover. On me. Another flash. Another impact. Closer this time. China was firing blind, but firing often enough to saturate the area. They weren't targeting soldiers. They were trying to collapse the entire mountain range. To bury the Crystal 9 deposits. The countermeasure Aoki's voice crackled through Ward's comms. Major Ward, listen carefully. We cannot rely on the Armstrong shields to stop these impacts, but we can stop the mass driver. Ward took cover behind a jagged outcrop. How? Aoki answered with a kind of grim satisfaction. We sent a strike team. A small one. Fast. Deep into Mare Imbrium. Ward knew immediately what that meant. A suicide mission. He also knew he would lead it. Aoki continued. If China believes we are vulnerable, they will attempt to capture your sector. Do not let them. Ward read the deeper message. Stopping the mass driver wasn't optional. It was survival. The enemies revealed as Ward prepared his team. A new alert flashed on the coalition networks. Drone footage. Captured just minutes earlier. At Mare Imbrium. The Chinese had begun assembling something enormous. A mobile siege platform. Armored. Powered by a Crystal 9 reactor. Escorted by Russian lunar tanks and North Korean plasma artillery. A moving fortress. And its destination. was the Allied mining zone. Ward stared at the projection. We destroy the mass driver, or that thing reaches us. Either way, we're on the clock. He sealed his helmet, activated his thrusters, looked back at his squad. Rangers, we move in 60 seconds. Hapter 12. Echoes in the dust of lunar night stretched across Merimbrium like a black ocean. Temperatures plunged, radiation climbed, and every sound, from a boot scraping regula to the low hum of suit systems, seemed too loud, as if the darkness itself was listening. Major Lex Harrington led the three-man recon element down the shallow ridge overlooking the abandoned Chinese forward habitat. The dome had collapsed days earlier during the bombardment, but telemetry hinted that someone or something was still inside. Thermals, Lex whispered, knowing full well whispering meant nothing over suit comms. Corporal Vance checked his wrist display. Negative, but I've got motion trails. Very faint. Could be debris. Or survivors, Lex thought. The Chinese base here, Lunar Research Node 43, had gone silent during the opening hours of the battle for Moon. Intelligence suspected it was preparing a kinetic strike from the surface, but no one ever confirmed. Now, Lex was about to find out. Inside the dome, they approached the shattered airlock, its framework twisted and half buried in dust. Lieutenant Mara Ishikawa knelt beside the breach, illuminating scorch marks with a low-power beam. These burns! They aren't from missiles. She swiped a finger through the powdery residue. Directed energy. Someone cut their way out. Vance shifted uneasily. So someone survived. Question is, where'd they go? Lex signaled them forward. Stay sharp. No unnecessary chatter. They slipped inside. Visibility dropped instantly as dust swirled like ash in the beam of their helmet lights. The interior was wrecked. Consoles torn open. Sample cases smashed. But one section, an inner lab, remained almost perfectly intact. Unscathed. It looked deliberate. Mara's voice cracked through comms. Lex, you need to see this. The discovery, she pointed to a sealed cylindrical container resting on a pedestal. In glowing, simplified characters, the label read, Yiyan Shilir, Lunar Source Genome. Lex exhaled slowly. No way. They had all heard rumors, scientists whispering that deep on the moon's surface were biological anomalies, fossil-like structures older than Earth life. But China had denied everything. Vance leaned closer. You think they found life? Mara corrected him quietly. Not life. Something that used to be alive. Lex noticed tiny footprints, child-size, but with an odd gait, leading from the pedestal deeper into the habitat. Not robotic. Not human. Something else. Footprints in the dark, the tracks terminated at a maintenance shaft in the far wall. Its hatch pried open from the inside. No tool marks. The metal was bent outward, as if by incredible pressure. Mara whispered. Something escaped. Vance swallowed audibly. And it's still out there. Lex didn't respond at first. He looked again at the cylinder labeled Lunar Source Genome, then at the open shaft. If the Chinese really had unearthed something ancient beneath the moon, then the war might not be the most dangerous thing happening here. Pack it up, Lex said at last. We bring the sample, and we follow the tracks. The three moved toward the shaft as lunar night settled deeper around them, silent, airless, and watching. Chapter 13. The silent pursuit to maintenance shaft descended at a steep angle beneath Lunar Research Node 43, narrowing quickly until the team had to crouch to advance. Their lights cut thin cones into the swirling dust. But beyond a few meters, everything fell back into a suffocating black. Lex checked the oxygen readout on his HUD. Hours of air remained, but it felt like the shaft itself was draining something more essential. Courage, calm, clarity. Vance followed just behind him. I hate this. Sir, feels like we're walking into a throat. Keep moving, Lex replied. We lose the trail, we lose answers. Mara sealed the Lunar Source Genome cylinder pack and climbed down last, pausing often to scan for radiation spikes or chemical traces. There's something strange, she said finally. No organic residue. No fluids. No thermal signature. Whatever made those prints. It's not giving off anything. Vance muttered, "That's not possible." Lex answered quietly, "It might be now." The tunnel opens after 50 meters. The shaft widened into a low-ceiling chamber reinforced with modular Chinese construction panels, the kind used for rapid lunar tunnel expansion. But these panels were warped, pushed outward, as if something massive had passed through. "Who the hell digs this deep?" Vance whispered. Mara illuminated a long gouge in the metal. "Not humans." Lex caught movement, reflected light flickering off the floor. Footprints. More of them now. Some small, some larger. Whatever had escaped the habitat. It wasn't alone. The abandoned chamber. They pressed deeper until the chamber abruptly ended at a massive circular door half buried in dust. A research seal shimmered faintly in Mara's light. "Ch1-4, sublunar," while Vance breathed out, his voice cracking. They were drilling. Downward. Not drilling, Mara corrected. Boring. Thermal cutting. This wasn't a geological project. It was an excavation. Lex stepped closer. His boots crunched on something brittle. He looked down. Fragments. Smooth, curved, and pale. Not rock. More like bone. Mara knelt, gingerly lifting a fragment. "It's fossilized. But the structure," she hesitated. "No known Earth organism looks like this." Vance shivered inside his suit. So what were they digging up? Mara met Lex's eyes through her visor. Something ancient, and something they shouldn't have touched. The sound then it came. Soft, distant, a scraping vibration from beyond the sealed door. The three froze. It came again, a long, deliberate drag, like stone on stone. Vance whispered, "That's movement. Something's alive down there." Mara's vitals spiked visible on Lex's HUD. "Lex, whatever the Chinese found under the surface, it's not dead." Another scrape. Closer. Lex steadied his breathing. "Back to the habitat," he ordered. "We regroup. We report. We do not open that door." But just as they turned, the circular hatch vibrated. Dust fell from the ceiling. The inner locking ring rotated half an inch with metallic groan. From behind the door came a soft, rhythmic tapping. Almost playful. Vance's voice trembled. "It knows we're here." Lex felt the truth hit him like a blow. It did, and it wasn't alone. Chapter 14. The first shots of the second Lunar War Earth rotated silently below, half shadowed, half glowing, as a vast network of Allied spacecraft assembled in Translunar Insertion Corridor 7. From a distance, they looked like drifting stars. Up close, they were the most advanced fleet humanity had ever built. Two U.S. supercarriers, the USSF Harriet Tubman and the USSF George Washington III, anchored the formation, surrounded by missile frigates from Japan, laser destroyers from South Korea, NATO New Generation Shield craft, and the Australian Solaris-class interceptor wings. Commander Arden Pierce stood at the forward tactical viewport aboard the Harriet Tubman, his eyes locked on the crescent silver arc of the moon. "Transmission confirmed," the comm officer announced. "Chinese and Russian fleets have broken orbit around Mare Crisium. They're headed toward Tycho Base with full velocity." Arden exhaled slowly. "So it begins." The war cabinet forms in the situation chambered deep within the carrier. The holographic table flickered to life. President Barron Trump appeared first, followed by Prime Minister Arai of Japan, President Su of South Korea, NATO Supreme Allied Commander Christensen, and the Ukrainian Aerospace Marshal, Oleksiy Honchar. Barron Trump spoke without theatrics. "This is it, ladies and gentlemen. China is moving on Tycho Crater. If they seize that region, they get the medal. If they get the medal, they get space." Prime Minister Arai leaned forward. "We cannot allow Beijing to monopolize a new element. It changes propulsion. It changes shields. It changes everything." Marshal Honchar added, "Ukraine's satellites detect Russian particle beam arrays powering up from lunar low orbit. They're aiming at your fleet, Commander Pierce." Arden nodded, calm in a way that unnerved even seasoned veterans. "We'll handle them." China's opening gambit far above the lunar equator. the People's Liberation Space Navy assembled its counterforce. The Starship Long March Infinite led their vanguard, massive, angular, optimized for brute force combat. Inside its command center, President Ch1-4 stood beside Admiral Zhao Yan. Zhao bowed slightly. "My president, Western fleets are moving to intercept. If we strike now, we catch them before they stabilize formation." Ch1-4 clasped his hands behind his back. His voice was soft, but burned with conviction. "Do not underestimate them. They are desperate, and desperate nations are dangerous." Zhao hesitated. "Sir, should we commit the subterranean asset?" Ch1-4's eyes flicked upward, almost offended he would ask so openly. "No, not yet. Let the Westerners bleed first." The first salvo back aboard the Harriet Tubman, alarms rippled through the command deck. Multiple energy spikes detected. PLA fleet projecting particle beams. Russian kinetic lances charging. Arden grabbed the rail. "All ships, execute scatter pattern Theta-1. Prepare for evasive." The stars outside shifted as Allied craft realigned into a spiderweb-shaped dispersion field. 3 seconds later, the darkness lit up. A Russian kinetic lance streaked past, glowing red as it slashed through vacuum, narrowly missing the Japanese cruiser Hiryu. A second one hit a NATO escort squarely, and in a burst of shrapnel and white fire, the vessel was gone. Gas hit Arden's earpiece from across the fleet. All ships returned fire. Allied lasers flared, painting neon scars across space. Dozens of beams converged on a Chinese destroyer, punching through its hull until the center folded inward like collapsing paper. But the enemy kept advancing. The battle expands, a void between Earth and the Moon erupted into a glowing battlefield, streaked with vaporizing metal and ion discharge. In the cockpit of her Korean interceptor, Captain Ch1-4 locked onto a Russian gunship, accelerating toward the Moon. "Target acquired," she whispered. "Engaging." Her ship launched forward, slicing through debris fields as her AI tracked the enemy's erratic movement. The Russian vessel fired wild, slanted bursts of plasma, forcing her to roll hard enough to slam her helmet against the canopy. "Ch1, break off!" a NATO pilot shouted. "No, she's mine." She fired a double pulse. The Russian ship fractured, venting atmosphere violently. Scratch 1. The Moon waits far below the chaos. The lunar surface remained silent, cold, indifferent, but beneath the gray dust, deeper than any human drill had gone, something shifted, something stirred. Whatever lived beneath the sublunar, well, heard the vibrations of battle. It sensed movement, heat, life, and it began to rise. The turning point admiral, Zhao, raised his chin. "Western forces are holding my president, but we are pushing them back." Ch1-4 stared at the tactical screen, without blinking. "Not enough." "What are your orders?" Zhao asked. Ch1-4 turned. His expression was absolute. "Prepare the sublunar asset. We are done waiting."